they may be good, they may be bad, they may not be what the next person sitting next to you might have, but they're yours. Now, what has to happen if this set of ethics that you live by, you're going to commit yourself to living that way? What do you have to do in order to take advantage of a scenario under your personal set of ethics? You're going to have to live with them. If you want to take advantage of a scenario and your ethics say that you shouldn't, what do you got to do? Yes, I'm sorry.
You have to convince yourself that it's okay.
Convince yourself that it's okay. That's part of it, yeah. But I was looking for another word. That is coming later. He said justify. That will come later. What about compromise? Does that make sense? You've got a set of values that you live by, and now you decide that maybe in the situation that you're put in that you might want to do something that you shouldn't be doing. So you end up compromising those values. And then, once you have the set of values, you compromise what you think is going to allow you to do something else, or you have a different mindset now that you can look differently at something, or turn your head in some cases. You may not do a thing at all. That's even worse in some cases. People that don't do anything but see it happening and don't take a stand, that's just as bad as the person who's doing it. That's my personal philosophy. But I've seen a lot more stuff in my career than you guys hopefully ever will. What was the word you used before?
Justify.
Justify. I've got my personal ethics. Now I'm going to compromise them because I want to do something else than what my core ethics tell me that I am able to do. Now I have to justify that what I'm about to do makes sense. Okay? I have now made a personal decision that I'm going to do something that kind of goes against what I really believe. Now there's a fourth factor in the ethics, compromise, justify triangle. What do you think that is? Somebody mentioned it before. And it occurs in every fraud that happens. But it also occurs in every lie that happens. And I think it was Mark Twain that said the only animal on this earth that lies is man. What are you doing when you lie? Are you making it public that you're lying? Or are you concealing the fact that what you're telling someone is not the truth? I think we all know what the answer is. We're concealing it. That is critical in allowing people to do something that they deep down inside don't believe is right for them to do in the first place. The concealment factor is huge. It's huge in creating the scenario in a person's mind that they're going to go ahead and do something. All right? And I want you to, if you walk away with nothing else today, remember that process that people go through to tell themselves that what they want to do, or what they're thinking about doing or not doing, is a very personal decision. And they aren't going to broadcast that. That concealment issue stays with them. They hold it inside. And then they begin to act differently, sometimes very subtle ways, sometimes very overt ways. But they're going to act different than what they really, truly feel inside. I had a scenario with my 2 kids. I've got 2 children. My wife says it's all my fault that these things happen. I've got 2 kids. One now is 33. One is about to be 30. When they were younger, I think they turned 18. Now, I don't know, how many in here turned 18 and got stupid? Come on, we all did, right? We all did things that we don't want to admit. My kids did that. And I remember sitting down with them saying, you know, at some point, I'm going to answer for all the stupid things you guys have done. And they said, Dad, it's not that you didn't teach us the right thing. We just chose to do something else. Now, what did they do? They compromised what they knew to be the right thing. And it's not like they were robbing banks, so don't get the wrong idea on this one, okay? But, you know, when you're younger and some of these things happen, you go, come on. Caused me to buy a Mark Twain sign and put it down in our rec room. Always tell the truth. If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. I put that down there for them and their high school friends. Now it makes it sound even worse for me as a parent, doesn't it? Come on, work with me here. This is, you know, all right, I'm not going to go that route anymore. But again, the whole idea, it's a personal decision. People will do something that ultimately they're going to look back and say, you know, I knew it wasn't right, but I did it anyway. Once you can get to that point in your personal feelings, then you can start talking about stealing from your employer, for instance. My job deals with occupational fraud. Anybody know what occupational fraud is?
You're stealing from your job.
Stealing from your job. Absolutely. There's the definition that the ACFE, Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, uses. The use of one's occupation for personal enrichment through deliberate misuse, da-da-da-da-da-da. It's taking from your employer. And it happens every day. It happens right here at the university. It happens at the McDonald's down in the corner. It happens at the 7-Eleven or whatever. Everybody has fraud going on in some way, shape, or form. Now, the relative amount or impact may be different. But if you're going to be black and white about it, fraud is fraud. There's no gray area. I only stole a little bit, therefore it really isn't as bad as somebody who stole a lot more. No, you both stole. That's wrong. At least if your personal code of ethics tells you it's wrong. If it tells you it's right, then you become the next Jesse James or, you know, whoever is a popular folklore robber hero. But when you get into a business scenario, and all of you are going to be there, some of you have been already, or maybe are now. You get into a business scenario, and your personal attitudes change and allow you to think that, hey, you know, if I want to, I'm going to take advantage of something here. That's when now we start to have another trouble, more problems. Now this one, this is the fraud triangle. I talked a little bit earlier about the personal ethics, the integrity triangle. It's just a takeoff of this one. But from a fraud perspective, if you think of fraud as a three-cornered stool, in order to have fraud occur, you've got to have some kind of pressure. Well, the pressure on a person can be as individual as the people that are going to potentially be stealing. It might be a gambling problem for somebody. It might be a divorce. It might be a potential layoff coming up of a spouse. You know, you've got bills. Maybe a drinking problem. It may be an affair. It may be all, like I said, I've seen a lot of different things, excuse me, and reasons that people steal. And I'm not talking about, you know, 50 bucks out of the petty cash drawer here. Most of the jobs that we do are seven-figure thefts. Seven figures doesn't sound like a lot anymore. Boy, somebody stealing $1 million used to be a really big deal. Now it's kind of, you know, is that all you could get? Some people look at it that way because they think it's a game. We've had some cases where people are stealing because it was a thrill to do it. Now, they didn't save the money so they could pay it back later, but, you know, it kind of feeds. People feed on these kind of things. They're getting away with something. Now let's see how much more we can get away with. It's like staying out late when you're in high school. Gee, mom and dad go to bed at 1 o'clock. They think I'm there at 1, and I sneak back out and don't come in until 3. Who's going to know? Now, when we talk about the fraud triangle, you've got to have an incentive or a pressure. That incentive or pressure isn't going to kick into the fraud triangle unless you decide that you're going to compromise your values and you're going to use somebody else's means to adjust your lifestyle or deal with your personal problem. In a business setting, if you've got that need, you also have to have an opportunity. What do I mean by opportunity in a business setting? You're an employee. What does opportunity mean? In a very simple way. What if you keep the petty cash fund? Yes?
You might not have a chance to do it again?
Say that again?
Something that you might not have a chance to do again?
Might not have the chance to do it again?
Yeah.
That, you're right, you might not. Because you might get caught the first time you try something. Opportunity in the context that I'm referring to it. Yes?
You have 360 degree of authority over it, so if you handle cash, put the cash in the safe, or any of that stuff, if you have full responsibility of the task that
This guy's in accounting, right? No, gee. Well, you're absolutely right. You're both right. There is an opportunity. You may not get another one, and you act on it. The kind of stuff I investigate, people aren't just doing it one time. They've been doing it for years. In most cases, it is years. And as I said earlier, that's why it's amazing that some people aren't caught earlier if people were just paying attention to what they see. If you're going to walk around, you know, with your head in the clouds, or, you know, you're walking around checking your text all the time, or your email, and you're not paying attention to what you see around you, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss a lot of stuff that isn't going to tell you off of the screen. I'm talking again about a business setting here. So, opportunity in the case of fraud means it is a recurring scenario that I control. In a very simplistic way of putting it, I control the petty cash fund. Nobody else can touch it. That's very simplistic. I have the opportunity to take the petty cash. You're not going to get to Mexico on that, but you have the opportunity. And finally, if you've got the need, you have the opportunity, you you now got to convince yourself, like we did before with your personal ethical conduct, you got to convince yourself that what you're doing isn't wrong. Most people that commit frauds within their organizations, they've got all kinds of excuses for it. It's nothing new or unique, it's their own reason for allowing them to continue stealing. It's like justifying that your outlook now can change on certain things so that your ethical conduct can change. That allows you to get into this kind of scenario in the first place. Now, the difference between the two is that when you look at your own personal set of ethics and you work your way around, when you get to the other triangle, you work your way around starting at the top from your personal ethics that you have deep inside of you. You go down to this compromise corner, which is the opportunity corner in the fraud scenario. You compromise your beliefs, then you justify why that compromise is okay. And you're going to keep that inside of you. And now we're back to this scenario that allows you to actually do something about it. And the attitude rationalization in a theft in a business setting happens how many times? How many times do I have to justify to myself that what I'm doing isn't wrong? When I'm stealing from my employer? Yes. Every time? One time, normally. Most people normally. Because if they convince themselves one time to steal it, that's kind of like a free pass for the rest of them. You've convinced yourself once to do it. If you can't do it that first time, there's not going to be a second time. But once you do it, people tend to just ignore the fact that what they're doing is wrong. Now it's a question of how much can I steal? And who's going to catch me? How are they going to catch me? All right, when we talk about personal ethics, and I mentioned before that everybody's got a different idea. That wasn't right. What did they do here? Push the wrong button. How do I get this to go down, or don't I? Here, let me do it on this one. Click. Here we go. I got it. Now this is just a quick one out of the Billy Madison movie. How do I turn this up? All right, and this is very, very brief, but it kind of highlights the issue that I'm getting at here with the...
I choose business ethics.
Mr. Gordon, the American business environment has fundamentally changed following the insider trading and savings and loan scandals. Explain business ethics and how they are applied today.
The ethics of business can be summarized in see, ethics are, you know, the thing about ethics.
I'm going to stop it there because he pulls a gun out and says that wasn't a fair question. People don't know half the time what ethics mean, especially when they're in the fraud scenario. They just don't have any idea how to explain what it is they're doing. They don't want to. They're in that concealed part of it. Everybody's got their own definition, right? This guy didn't have any. According to what my daughter said to me about what this movie was about, or at least this part of it. So, what can happen? Those of you who were here last year with me saw a variation of this. Some of the faces are the same, some aren't. The point of this is, how do you tell who's honest and who isn't? What's that?
Says you can't.
You can't. Why can't you?
Because everyone reacts differently.
Say it again.
Everyone reacts differently. Everyone reacts differently.
Everyone reacts differently. Okay. Reacts to what?
Well, let's say if you are trying to determine if they are being deceptive in something, they might say, some people get quieter, some people make up more false facts to defend themselves. It's just, it becomes difficult to determine which ones are lying, because a lot of us, even if you're asked a question about something that would seem deceptive, but you did nothing wrong, you still sometimes get flustered and start seeming like you might be guilty.
You're absolutely correct. There are a lot of outward signs that, you know, people have studied and have chronicled that, you know, if this is the kind of question that's asked and this is the response, or this is the physical, the physical sign that is showing from the person being asked the question, there is a high probability that what they're telling you may not be accurate, or may be wrong, or may be an outright lie. Those are factors that you're going to be, if you become a fraud examiner, for instance, you will be trained in some of these things, and a lot of this is experience over time. But you can tell, you can tell when your friends are handing you a line, can't you? On certain things. Sure you can. If you stop and think about what it is that was said, or how it was said, or in what context it was said, you can begin to determine whether or not somebody is telling you the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But you can't do that by looking at somebody's face. What's your name?
Sarah.
Sarah. Sarah looks sweet and innocent to me. Is she? Anybody know her? I think you are, just by your looks. All right? But that's not good enough. And I'm sure all of you, by your looks, everybody does not look like a criminal in here. But some of these people up here do. Anybody got a guess? You can't do too bad because there's only 7 pictures. Just by looking at them, can you tell? Sarah, what do you think? You're honest.
I'm gonna say the cowboy hat.
The cowboy hat. Okay. Why?
Because my friend here has been to your talk before.
Oh, that doesn't count.
I was
Okay.
honest.
That is, you were honest, that's right. The cowboy hat lady is one of the cases that I was called in on to help the client understand how they were defaulted of $54 million. That was the Dixon, Illinois case, all right? That lady in a cowboy hat stole $54 million over 19 years. All right, who else up there looks a little suspect? And you don't say a word.
Bottom right corner.
Bottom right corner.
This looks like a function.
Yeah, I guess it does, doesn't it? Okay, the mug shot. I haven't seen too many mug shots where people are smiling. Yes.
Arnold Schwarzenegger looks pretty suspect there.
Yeah, I like that picture, so I threw that one in. Yeah, he does. He looks suspect. And again, you start to profile based on somebody's looks, right? Schwarzenegger looks like he's going to take you apart if you say the wrong thing or look at him the wrong way. Who else? Anybody else have something to offer? What about the guy in the suit? Yes.
Yeah, he looks pretty suspect, because you seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street?
Uh-huh.
That's why.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, he looks pretty slick, doesn't he?
He's at a wedding.
Could be. Okay. The point being here is that, again, you can look at people, you can decide whether or not you like them a lot of times because you don't, you may decide you don't even want to talk to somebody based on how they look. You don't know. But you cannot tell whether they're going to steal from you or whether they are inherently dishonest people. Now, just for sake of discussion, this one is my niece, and this is my son. And this is a girl I wish my son would meet. I have no idea who that is. This one stole 54 million bucks. This one stole 27 million bucks. The Koss case in Milwaukee. Koss headphones? Anybody from Milwaukee? A lot of money there. Mostly spent on shoes, I understand. That one I got a chance to comment on for some publications. I didn't actually work on that one. This one I actually worked on. This one, the mugshot thing, yeah, it kind of looks like it. This person was found guilty of theft in a business setting, about $500,000. That's what she ended up pleading to. But you look at these people, you just don't know. That's why this concealment issue that I mentioned before in somebody's heart, where only they really know what's going on inside. Pretty tough to tell. All right? So, these personal ethics. Everybody's got their own definition. We've beaten that one to death. I'd like to hear what some of yours are, but I'm not going to embarrass anybody. Compromise. Something intermediate between different things. All right? If we're talking about the integrity triangle, endangering, especially a reputation or exposure to danger, suspicion, etc., compromise of one's integrity. Now, some people's integrity is at a higher level than others, but it's still their integrity. Dishonorable or shameful concession. You know, basically, you're saying, okay, this is my belief. I'm going to compromise my belief to go ahead and do something that I know is wrong, but I'm going to do it anyway. Then I'm gonna justify it. This is the justify thing is the most interesting part about how people try to defend what they do. If they're even willing to put it out there that they've adjusted their belief system. Because the conceal factor 99 out of 100 times stops them from talking about it, because then they have to admit to doing something wrong, or to making themselves look less in front of someone. The only way fraud can survive and thrive in business is through concealment. I've had district attorneys, I've had judges I've had to explain to the difference between theft and concealment. Theft is the physical taking of an asset. Concealment is hiding it in the books and records of a company. The two sometimes are mutually exclusive. Because you've got some people that just flat out steal. They don't bother with trying to hide it in the books and records. They make off with it and you may not see them again. The ones that are successful in a long-term scenario of stealing have to conceal. Because they must make it look like nothing's wrong. And they must keep up the appearance that nothing's wrong from a personal perspective. That's why that justify part on the integrity triangle is so important. I'm justifying to all of you that I'm a good guy, even though deep down inside I know what I'm really up to, what I'm really all about. All right, dishonesty in the workplace. You kind of wonder how many people are thinking about doing something. Well, this isn't going to tell you, but it will tell you how many are doing something. This was a study done back in, when was it, 1989. But the percentages are still appropriate. Out of that survey, 3 out of 10 employees, in effect, are stealing, will steal or are stealing from their employer. They admit to it. Now, please keep in mind, this is not a qualified dollar amount, like I stole less than 500, more than 500, more than 100,000, or $1 million. It has no parameter in terms of how much theft was taken, or whether it's even money. It might be assets, it might be tools out of a tool crib at a manufacturing concern. It might be using the company vehicle for personal use. It might be punching in 10 minutes late, or not punching in at all and having somebody else punch you in as if you were there on time, and you show up a half hour later, and then you take your full pay. There's so many different ways of stealing from your employer, and a lot of times people don't equate some of these things with stealing, but they're still theft. 3 out of 10 are going to steal, 3 out of 10 might steal, and now we're back to that need, opportunity, and being able to justify. The first group will steal. They've got all 3 of them going for them. The second group, they've got 2 of the 3. They've got the need, they've got the opportunity. They just haven't justified it in their mind yet that they can go ahead and take the plunge. 4 out of 10 are inherently honest people that are not going to be doing what they shouldn't be doing. So that's a scary thought. So as you look around the room, pick 3 other people and decide everybody else is either stealing or will steal. Right? Count 10, subtract 6. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you pick yourself as being one of the honest ones. All right. Another definition of integrity. It's got to be rock solid, or else it is subject to compromise and justification. So whatever yours is, I hope it's solid. I mentioned this one before. Tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. It's so basic. But when you're interviewing people that are stealing and doing wrong, it's hard for them to keep their stories straight. That's why I said before, how do you tell if somebody's lying to you? Well, you can't tell by looking at them, but you sure can tell by the types of questions you ask and the approach that you take in the interview. Think about that the next time your parents are asking you something. They have a reason for why they're asking a question, more often than not. Gosh, I guess I'm. Core values, again, goes back to that personal ethics issue. They define what your organization believes and how you can want your organization to resonate with your employees and the external world. Who are the stakeholders? Well, we briefly mentioned those people before. You've got shareholders, you've got employees, you've got customers, you have the community in which your plants are located or your retail outlets are located. All those people can be impacted by an act of wrongdoing within an organization. So it goes well beyond just the person who's committing the fraud. All right. These are, I mentioned Enron, I mentioned WorldCom, I mentioned costs. I didn't mention Volkswagen Audi, because this one kind of ties together what I've been talking about. Organizations that have the proper tone coming out of the corporate hierarchy, the board of directors, the CEO, the CFO. If the hierarchy believes in an ethical environment and acts out in an ethical way and, in effect, requires everyone in the organization to subscribe to the ethics that the organization has laid out. Well, hopefully they're good ethical points that they want subscribed to. If you've got strong leadership, you've got a good ethical base on which to for everyone to kind of rally around, you're going to have a pretty good organization going for you. It's not necessarily going to stop fraud from happening, but it's going to make it a lot harder for somebody to be successful in the long run to take a company down. But if you've got all these real nice, you got an ethics policy, for instance, or you got a fraud policy in your organization, and a number of other things that companies come up with. If top management doesn't really truly believe that that's the right way to operate and that they personally believe that they're going to operate that way, you're going to see a migration. It's what we started talking out about. If everybody in an organization believes that doing something wrong is the right way to do it, what are you going to have? Chaos, conflict, and ultimately somebody will go to jail for it. Anybody know what the Audi TDI diesel thing is about? Anybody? Yes. Emissions. What else? According to yesterday,
A piece of hardware, when it's being tested for the emissions test, they have a positive result, so it's just a hardware manipulation on the.
Pretty ingenious way of getting around it. Anybody here have a VW with a diesel motor in it? I know some people that do. They're gonna get some money out of this. What do you think the tone at the top was at VW? I mean, did this thing start with a guy out on the shipping dock saying, gee, we forgot to put this part in? Boy, I don't want to lose my job. I better come up with something to make sure that this thing passes muster when it gets off the boat and wherever it is we're shipping it to. Do you think that's how it started? No. It had to start from the top, and not necessarily because they knew that there was an emissions problem. It starts from the top when corporate says, this is what we expect, and I don't care how you get there. Let me just pull this up quick. All right. Now, this particular article was written by Bob Lutz. Anybody know that name? He was the former president, CEO of Chrysler. I kind of liken it to the pot calling the kettle black, but I don't know enough about it. Chrysler had its own set of problems when Lutz was there, but Lutz has a fairly decent reputation from the standpoint of being honest about what it is he was doing. He made this comment about VW. And these two guys right here, Peach, the guy on the right, this guy is he's the head honcho at VW. And what his approach is, you will do it my way, you will do it at any cost to yourselves or to whoever. I don't care what you have to do. I want it done, and I want it done this way. And if you don't do it, I'll find somebody else who will do it. And in this case, it was pass the emissions test. Diesels have a whole different set of issues than what a gasoline engine car does. And the clean diesel is what Audi and Volkswagen were touting when they brought them to the US. Europe used them for a long time. But now they were going to be clean because of the EPA here. Well, they really weren't. And I can't remember how many millions of vehicles have been sold. But Volkswagen and Audi made a lot of money off of a lot of people under a false pretense. The tone at the top was such that everybody bowed down to the ultimate command of what the top guy said. Didn't matter if it flew in the face of everything that they stood for as a company. Deceit was mandated. And it came from the very highest levels of the company. And that's what can set the tone for even the smallest fraud or theft within an organization. If you're looking around at people that you work with, or you're looking at your boss, or you're looking at your boss's boss, and they talk about doing things a certain way, but then you see them not doing things that certain way, you've just opened the door for everyone to create their own scenario and to potentially take advantage. We've had cases where we've actually had people do things wrong, get caught, substantial sums of money. And top management chose not to prosecute. What do you think happened with that company? They chose not to prosecute. They didn't even fire the person. What have you now done? enabled the behavior for others to do it. You've set a precedent. Now, Joe did it. Sally wants to do it, so she's gonna do it because Joe got away with it. And if they go after her, she's gonna go after Joe. It's a vicious circle. And it all starts at the very highest levels of an organization. If your organization cannot set the tone for how the organization is expected to act and how the individuals who are part of that organization are expected to act within the realm of their jobs and their employment with that company, you're going to ultimately end up in chaos. And that's what happened with Enron. That's what's happening right now with VW. That's happened with so many other companies. The fallout isn't just the loss that is incurred when somebody steals. The psychological damage that goes on amongst fellow employees when a fraud is identified. You can't put a dollar figure on it, but do you think it impacts productivity? You think it impacts productivity if somebody's doing something wrong and it, yeah. That's why I said right from the outset, if you walk away with nothing else from this today, keep your eyes and ears open. You're going to see a lot of stuff that you just took for granted before, and now you're going to go, I wonder why we're doing it that way. And I'm not saying everything you're going to see is going to be bad or it's going to be a fraud in the making. But it might be an improvement that you can suggest. It might be the beginning of something that is going wrong, though. All right? And if you're able to put that out there, part of the problem with companies is that people get complacent and they see things and they know they're wrong, and if no one says anything, it goes long enough, it now doesn't become an issue because it was different. It now becomes accepted procedure because it's been allowed to happen for an extended period of time. Okay, we got people coming in, that means we're having...
No, so I forgot to tell you that one class just ended and they told me they were going to send, the faculty told me he was going to send these students.
Oh,
So I hope that's okay with you.
Oh, no, that's fine. I'm,
10 to 15 more minutes.
yeah, I pretty much have said what I want to say, and I hope I've gotten the point across to you that corporate fraud doesn't start at the corporate level necessarily. It starts in the heart of every individual person that decides that their set of values can't be compromised by themselves, which then allows them to go into that fraud triangle scenario if they've got opportunity and need. Okay? Because if you can't convince yourself that your ethics, if your ethics, personal ethics are strong enough that you will not compromise yourself no matter what the issue, you're not going to have a fraud problem with that person. That's why I'm saying if you can get people to think about what it is they're doing personally, it feeds in to the overall impact that the corporation has. And if you look at it from the other, so we're talking about from the bottom up, and we're talking about from the top down. The bottom up being each individual person and their ethical views. And from the top down, the corporate ethical position that the company takes, and do the CEO and the top people in the organization, management team, do they live that and are they imparting that upon everybody else so that it flows downward? Eventually it will meet somewhere, and if they're both good positions, you're going to have an excellent company. All right. I don't have a lot of other things that I want to discuss. I've got a lot of statistics. If somebody's interested in more information on the fraud impact, it's some scary numbers. I've got it here. I could show it. I don't know if you want to waste time with that or not.
It's up to you. If you don't, yeah, I think it's probably the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners.
I'm sorry?
It's the ACFE data.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we can, if If you send me your slides, I can send to the faculty.
Yeah, the ACFE, if you want to learn more about how bad the problem is in this country, and worldwide for that matter, go to acfe.com. And the main page, when that pops up, it'll take you to 2016 report to the nations on occupational fraud and abuse. And the stuff in there will, you're going to go, oh my gosh, I can't believe it could be that bad. 5% to 6% of revenues in companies are lost because people are stealing. Now, you think about a $100,000 company, 5% is what? $5,000. Somebody do the math on a $100 million company. The numbers are huge. The other thing that's interesting in that study, it breaks it out as to who's committing these kind of things. Who's committing the frauds, what level in the organization, how much education have they had, how long have they been working for the company. What do you think in terms of the ability to commit fraud and the impact, the dollar impact of a fraudulent transaction? Who do you think is going to get more out of the company? Somebody that just started but has a lot of access, or somebody that's been there a long time and has worked their way through? Yes. Been there a long time. Why? Excellent. Yeah, they know the system. Some people come in having been bounced from another job because they got caught. And the company didn't do their homework to find out what's the real background of this person. There have been people that have come in and within 6 months of being employed, they are stealing. Because they've been employed in a position that allows them access and opportunity. But it's the people that have been there a long time. People that don't take vacations. People that are always the first ones there in the morning and the last ones there at night. What do you normally associate with people like that? Hard workers, dedicated, company first. And it very well may be. I'm not saying just because somebody does that they're a thief. But when you start to put other things together with those kinds of behaviors, you start to form a pattern. The case of the person who had the mugshot comment. That person would not let anybody else go to the bank to make a deposit, and would not let anybody else go to the post office to pick up the mail. Now, people found that odd. Found it very odd. It's a control issue. But nobody did anything about it. Nobody even said anything about it. They all said later, well, yeah, she wouldn't let anybody do this. It wasn't because she was a good employee, it was because it was part of the what that she was hiding behind. The concealment. Because if somebody else picked up the bank statement, how do you think the lady who stole the $54 million got caught? They were doing a conversion. She was on vacation. She had it all set, though, that only she and one other designated person could go to the bank, get the bank statements. Well, they needed a cut-off bank statement. Everybody know what a cut-off bank statement is? It's something that you need as of a particular day at this point in time, and you have one run. It's not the end of the month or your normal bank statement cycle. They needed one on a particular day when she was gone. They sent somebody down to pick it up. They opened up all these different accounts, and lo and behold, there's one that had about $4 million in it that nobody ever heard of. And nobody could account for it. Nobody understood why. That's how this person got caught. because there's always something where they stumble. And the lady in the mugshot, kind of the same thing. She was on vacation and bank called. I wanted to know why there was a check written out to her. They were looking at, this happened to be an end of the month statement scenario, but they were looking at the canceled checks on a screen. And there were a number of checks that went through a particular account that had very low volume and very low dollars. She would funnel them in, funnel them right back out, but she actually, instead of just taking them out in cash, wrote checks to herself, and then there was a paper trail. Because now we saw what it was, when, where it went, what bank it was being negotiated at, opened up a whole new set of transactions that we had to investigate. People slip up, they make mistakes. Any questions on anything at all as it relates to fraud, as it relates to ethics, as it relates to parenting? You know, you don't get to be as old as I am and not have some parenting experience. So when I use my kids as examples, I hope you took it in the spirit of intended. I was not intimating any of you were like that.
I have one for this.
Yes.
You know, last year was really fascinating when you came in. You're really a detective, and you've had so many cases you investigated. I'm just curious about what was the process like, how it got really finds out what was going on, how they approached you, and then how you did the investigation. What's the process there, and what, like a typical case without revealing much again, what the outcome was.
Well, everybody hear that? We're talking about the kind of cases that we work on as fraud investigators. I've had literally hundreds of different cases that have come from literally all different types of sources. Very seldom do I have the same client a second time. I think people don't want to see me bad enough the first time, they surely don't want to see me the second time. But, that being said, most of what we do is we're hired through law firms. Law firms have the ability to, in effect, manage information under the attorney-client privilege, which CPAs, fraud examiners, we do not have that same capability. So our engagements are usually through law firms. Sometimes we're hired directly by district attorney's offices. I've done cases for U.S. Attorney's Office. You know, they come from a variety of situations. Sometimes we're hired by insurance companies. What usually happens is that somebody has screwed up. Somebody slips up, and now there's something that doesn't look right. So then we get the call, we go in, we decide, well, there have been cases I turned down because the things have been so sloppy, it would be hard to prove that it wasn't that person plus maybe 3 other people. But most of the time in these cases, you start from what was identified and how people found that one, you know, that smoking gun. Because there's a transaction that always causes the house of cards to tumble. You find that first transaction, then you work your way back. And the first part, you start by deciding who's got the access, where is the opportunity in that fraud triangle. Once you see where the opportunity is, then you can begin to branch out in terms of who you're going to interview, the kinds of records you're going to have to look at. Conducting a fraud investigation is in many cases like chasing something down a blind alley. You just hope that when you get to the end of the alley, you've got the answers you're looking for. The good fraud investigators are the ones that can tell when they're just a short way in that this alley's not gonna give them what they need. They gotta back up and they gotta go down another alley, another venue, another angle. It's very seldom that just one type of scheme is being perpetrated by somebody. There's usually multiple ones going on. I mean, there may be asset misappropriations, you know, which can be anything from stealing cash through dummy vendors or payroll schemes, any number of different things like that. Or you can have corruption schemes going on where you're actually defrauding the company you work for through a vendor that you're in collusion with. Those are extremely hard to uncover and to document because you've got to get somebody to turn on the other one. I've had a couple of those. I've had one out on the East Coast in, that was extremely contentious from the standpoint of it was a municipal entity. And nobody wanted to believe that the person who ultimately was found guilty actually did something wrong. But again, it's like we said before, who was it? You said people that have been there a long time can have, they basically run the show in most cases. Everybody trusts them. And the worst thing you can do is to trust somebody implicitly without verifying anything, because you're going to be disappointed. And that's where that attention thing comes in. Pay attention to what's going on around you. You'll be surprised the things that you're going to see, that if you're honest with yourself about it, you're going to go, that doesn't make sense. But it's not all going to be fraud, it's not all going to be theft, but it may be an opportunity for improvement in a control system. So, control structure usually gives the opportunity for somebody to get in and do something, and when we identify who that person is, what controls they have, where they can get their fingers in, that pretty much tells us what the universe of possibilities is going to be when we're doing the investigation. And then we're down those blind alleys with this armful of stuff that we have to look at. You know, because even though there's this much impossibility, it might only be this much in terms of reality that they actually played with and did something with. And then when the thing is done, you know, the reporting on these things is huge. The lady in the mugshot, the report there was 950 pages long. The one that we just did, and I was commenting on it earlier, the last one that I testified in 9 days before I retired last May, we literally went different parts of the world to gather information. It took 3 years. We ended up identifying $61 million of debt that was placed on balance sheets that impacted the valuation of stock. Now, it wasn't outright theft, but it allowed the purchase of or the redemption of a minority shareholder's stock to be for a much lower number than it really should have been. So they're stealing and then they're stealing. But that one, reports there exceeded 3,000 pages. So, I mean, they can range from a 2-page, here's what I found, do with it what you want, to 3,000 pages of information and documents and countless hours in the courtroom trying to explain what it is you just came up with. It's an exciting profession, it really is. If you like solving puzzles, this is a good job for you to be in. And the puzzle is never the same. That's the fun part about it. There are similarities, but there's never 2 cases that are exactly alike. And so, you know, and again, you get to work with a lot of different people in a lot of different scenarios. You get to help people in a lot of cases. People are actually happy when you're done. They aren't happy when you come in, but they're happy when you're done for a number of reasons, especially if they've been smart about their insurance coverage. So if you're entertaining thoughts of some sort of career in law enforcement or some kind of financial aspect, fraud examination is an interesting way to go. Most of it happens now either through law enforcement or through consulting firms such as Whitworth. And it takes experience to get into this area, so you've got to gain some experience first. And that's probably hardest for young people because they want to jump into the fun stuff. I did a lot of boring audits before I got into fun stuff. So, did that kind of give you a background on things? And I'll tell you, if you are ever in need of kind of an adrenaline jolt, then just choose some of the clients that I've had in the past. Because as I look back on it, my wife has said to me a number of times, why did you take that on? My only answer that made any sense to me was, well, at the time it seemed like a good idea. Because some of the people that you end up with, dealing with either, not always directly, but on the periphery, you begin to wonder from a personal perspective, did you make the right choice? So, you guys are a long ways from having to make those kind of decisions, but eventually, if you stay in it long enough, you will. And I'm not talking about that I want to work for this company. It's what am I going to get out of this when it's all done, other than headaches and trouble from somebody that doesn't want me to finish.
So you feared for your life?
There were a couple, yeah. There were a couple. And, I did one in California. I ended up testifying out in fact, it was San Bernardino County. But it involved imports from Oregon. There were some really shady things going on. And the case in Italy was extremely interesting. One of the first ones I did. But I realized that I didn't want to be anywhere near where they had put me up because people weren't telling the truth in the initial meetings. So I actually changed hotels twice, and then when I tried to leave the country, I was detained as a potential terrorist. See, that made it all interesting and worthwhile. How many of you can tell that kind of story? Okay, that's about all I have.